Welcome, everybody. My name is Tony Taylor. I am the ADR specialist, program specialist at the Northwest campus. I'm going to introduce our panel. So I'm going to ask, let's see if Tony, Ken, so Vito and Syria, if you can turn on your cameras now, I'm going to introduce you. So we've got two students and two faculty members. I'll first introduce Syria Delgado. Syria was a graduate of Desert View High School. She's been at Pima since the fall of 18, is that correct? She is looking at transferring. She's working on a transfer degree and her interest is in elementary education. So Syria, thank you so much for being a part of this. Our next student is someone a lot of you probably in the Sunnyside School District know, Vito Pepitone. Vito came to me as a senior right out of CDO High School. He registered with our department. Gosh, when was that, Vito? Probably 2006, 2005?
2007.
Wow, I'm feeling old now. He got services from the ADR department. He went on to the U of A, he got his master's degree, and now he works as a transition specialist for the Sunnyside School District. We're very happy. Thank you for volunteering, Vito. In the past, people have put on evaluations. It would be great on the student panel to hear from former students, seeing like where they are today and what's going on. So Vito is an excellent example. Next, we have Ken Vorndren. Ken is a writing instructor out of the Northwest campus. He was also the head of our honors program. Ken has since retired, but we are fortunate enough to have him as an adjunct faculty where he's continuing to teach writing classes. And finally, last and certainly not least, we've got Juan, aka Tony Vinton. Tony is a math instructor out of the Northwest campus. He is also now head of the online math program. He has taught everything from soup to nuts, from basic math to advanced calculus. So great guy, and thank you for being a part of this. Thank you, all of you. Questions can be sent to adrhelp@pima.edu at any time, and we will direct them to the person who can best answer it. Though this session was previously recorded, you can continue to submit questions to adrhelp@pima.edu. Also, the restroom is just down the hall, so you'll have to find it yourself. Anyway, we'll go ahead and begin, and I'm going to get the ball rolling. So again, feel free, any of you that want to address a question to our faculty or our students, it can be about anything. What are your expectations in your classroom? What do you wish you knew as a student, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to get the ball rolling, and I'd like to address each one of the panelists for this one. I'll start with the students. What is one thing that you wish you had known or better prepared for prior to coming to college? And to the faculty, that same question, but it'll be, what is one thing you wish students knew, whether they have a disability or not? What do you wish students knew about classes, about college before registering for your courses? So let's go ahead and start with Syria. If you could just say, what's something you wish you had known or prepared for, or you were glad you prepared for?
I honestly wasn't prepared for anything. Going into college, it's way different. For me, with all the disabilities that I have, I feel like I was not 100% sure what I was going into until I found ADR. I honestly would have prepared myself from asking more questions, to like opening myself to Renee, which I'm glad I did in the first place, like in the second semester of it, and to ask more questions about my teachers about anything, even though it sounds silly. But yeah, that's for me. Just ask more questions about everything.
Great. Okay, thanks. So Vito, how would you answer that?
So I was in a similar situation. I would say I wasn't really prepared. When I went in, I was lucky enough to have a good support team from CDO when I was graduating that pushed me to go into Pima, to talk to you, Tony Taylor, when I first started. I think what I could say is one thing I wish that would have helped me when I was joining Pima Community College would have been having more of an idea what I wanted to do. When I first went to Pima Community College, it wasn't to actually get a transfer to go to the University of Arizona. It was actually to be auto mechanic at the time. So it was very interesting that I really didn't know what I was doing. So when I got there, Tony Taylor was a lot of help for me when I got started.
Okay, thank you, Vito. I'd like to switch over to Ken. In your all your writing classes, and a lot of the classes he taught are classes that were required for transfer for most degrees, if not all degrees, as well as being the head of the honor program. What is something you wish students knew more about or were more prepared for?
Thanks, Tony. Actually, I think Syria and Vito have really hit on the two things that students really need to do. One is be self-responsible. You know, what I heard in the very brief stories from Syria and Vito was that they took some steps to make their experiences better. And second, it's find the community, utilize the community, utilize the support. So it's both and. I think students really in college have to learn how to be self-responsible and how to access and utilize the support that's available. Both things are really necessary. And to the students who may not know what they want to do, that is totally normal coming into college. That's what this experience is about, is finding your way. And that's an important thing to remember. You're not behind if you don't know what you want to do. That's normal for somebody who's 18, 19, 20 years old.
Thank you. And Tony, what would you care to add to that?
I think Ken really hit it well, and the students. When I started college, community college in Texas, I was about 18 or 19, and honestly, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was told by my dad that I should go to college, but he can't pay for it, and I said, okay. So I started taking classes, but I honestly just met with an advisor. And at the time I just said, well, I'm not sure what I want to do. And they said, start with your basics. And that was the start of it. In the first few classes, I felt like I was trying to understand my part in college, but more importantly, trying to understand my role of what I wanted. And I think that's what Ken and the students really do portray, is that you really do have to be a bit more independent about and responsible about what it is that you want. It really helps to come in with that focus. But if you don't, that's okay. And as Ken said, in a way, college is like that. It can help you find your way. It can help you find what you want to do, and definitely what you don't want to do. So, yeah.
Okay, well, we've got a couple of questions coming in. Let's see. Okay, someone asked, and this can be answered by students and or faculty. Says, I get kind of anxious and nervous in the classroom. How do I overcome this?
I guess I'll go first. Oh gosh, anxious and nervous. I'm anxious and nervous right now, and it's not a classroom. You just go with it. Honestly, you can't help it. It's like with a disability, you just can't stop and like pause the button for your disability. You just go with the flow. If you need something to fidget on, take it to the classroom. It's okay if you look weird. We all look weird in some ways, but we're all different. We're not supposed to be the same. Just go for it. Who cares? Just go with the flow.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else would like to take that? Vito?
For me, when I came to anxious or nervous in the classroom, for myself, half the time I would actually have to meet with an instructor sometimes, because some of that has to do with probably being called on in class, or having to do something in front of that classroom. Usually talking to them at the end of class, when the other students have left, you're able to talk to an instructor, letting them know you're a part of the ADR has been useful for me, as well as just like letting them know that you're trying to just learn, and want their help to understand stuff and be able to ask questions as well.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else like to add to that? Ken?
Yeah, what I think is important is always the emotional piece. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is walking through fear. And I think we all have to do that in every new situation. When I go someplace and I'm not familiar with it, I have to walk through nervousness and discomfort and getting used to it. And as an instructor, I really appreciate it when my ADR students identify themselves, come talk with me, and allow us to become part of the process, to become part of the team that will make the experience at Pima a good one. And I'm sure Tony will verify this, but as instructors, we want to work with all of our students. We want all of our students to pass. We want all of our students to do well. And we want them to have a good experience in the classroom. And my experience is also that Pima students are very accepting of others. We do a team project in my honors class, and all of my ADR students have been fully, completely, wholeheartedly parts of all of their teams and welcomed. So I think that's important to remember.
We'll move on to the next question. Someone asked, how do you reach to your goal of what you want to do in your life? I'm one of the students who goes to Pima as well. Anyone, how did you find out what you wanted to major in, or where do students go to find out their goal? Tony? Okay.
Yes, sure. Sorry, I didn't have a raise hand option, but I found as a student when I was taking classes that taking these different subjects helped me to decide what I liked and what I didn't like. What do I enjoy studying, right? What do I not enjoy studying? And that really helps you to define the things that you want to do long-term, right, career-wise. So really thinking about that is important, and it's okay to kind of go outside your comfort zone. There are the gen eds that you would be required to take, but if there's something that you find yourself a little interested in, that's what it's about. You can take a creative class, either creative writing or maybe a math class that you weren't necessarily required to take, but all of a sudden you really enjoyed. That's where I fell into it. I really enjoyed parts of math and I had no idea why. I ended up changing my major probably 20 times, and I'm sure they got tired of me at that office, but I did it anyway. So yeah, I think sort of process of elimination, but really being willing to go out and try different things.
Okay, thank you. We have a question that is addressed to the students here. How did you learn about ADR? How did you know ADR existed? Syria, why don't we start with you?
How I learned about ADR is that Renee came into my classroom one day. It was all organized by Debbie from Desaview. She helped a lot getting us interested into ADR, even though we weren't sure about going to college or not. She had us contact her from the beginning, but like I said, I wasn't all in answering questions, or not answering questions, but like asking questions. I was so nervous about that, but I had to get out of my comfort zone along the way. But yeah, Debbie Devards was the one that introduced me to Renee.
Vito, how did you hear about us?
My case manager and my transition specialist at the time at CDO let me know about ADR, and was the one that told me about Tony Taylor, yourself, and they were the ones that brought me to Pima Community College to do my testings, to get tested in to my English, math, and reading. So that was how they introduced me to the ADR.
Oh, okay. This is another question directed to the students. How do you feel that your accommodations have helped you succeed while in college?
I'm still in college. I'm still going for the career that I want and the degrees and everything else. Oh, I feel like if I didn't have accommodations with ADR or didn't know about them, I would have like went downhill. I honestly wouldn't survive without them.
And Vito?
Just the accommodations that I kind of used that for ADR really did help for me. I'm not the greatest writer. I have a counterpartner team member that does a lot of my writing for me, and even today, but I feel like it wasn't for the writing, even a writing tutor that I've had from my undergraduate, I probably wouldn't be where I'm today without them. And when I did my master's program, luckily enough, I still had that writing tutor even then that was able to help me. I feel like ADR during my time at Pima and at the University of Arizona really did help me to get what I needed, which was pretty much just be able to use assistive technology for dragging and also using note taking as well.
And also something that wasn't around too much when Vito was here, it's been really grown, is assistive technology. We use that a lot for writing. We have voice recognition software. We have digital recording. We have smart pens. There's all kinds of stuff that really now has been a benefit to students. This is a question for faculty. How did you feel about working with ADR? If you've had several accommodations in your classes, how did it affect how you taught your class?
I'll go first.
I think you froze.
Nowadays I get, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, now you're on, yeah.
Oh, sorry. So what's great about working with our ADR program in office is that we get contacted right away when there is a student who has an ADR accommodation. Typically what I do is I contact that student right away just to verify, make sure that the given accommodations are going to work, because the student probably has just started reading the syllabus maybe by that first day of class or maybe a few days before. And so there are times where they just want to make sure that the given accommodations work. So I feel like that communication, as long as it starts in the beginning, works super well. And as long as the student is willing to reach out and just communicate, like just literally come up and talk to me, or if it's an online class, email me or call me. A lot of times we get things done and taken care of very quickly, and it's usually a smooth process. If there's an unusual, and I say unusual, which is to say like just not a normal accommodation, I contact the ADR rep. Sometimes it's Tony, and it's great. We have a simple conversation about what the student needs. Privacy is still taken into consideration, which is super wonderful. It seems to go very smoothly. I feel very lucky. We work with people like Tony Taylor and John Howe and the rest, and I want to say that the students seem to be treated fairly. At least that's what it seems to me on my end.
Thank you. Ken, you have anything to add?
Yeah, thanks, Tony, for that. That's a really good answer. I don't think I necessarily change anything about how I teach my class, but what I really try to do is make sure that the student and ADI and I are working as a team in terms of making sure that the semester is successful.
Okay. Another question here is for faculty. Do you ever feel like you had to teach your class differently because there was someone with a disability in your class?
Well, I'll start. Sometimes there are different kinds of challenges that come up. So, for example, in the honors course that I teach, it is a semester-long team-based project. And I had a semester when I had a blind student and a deaf student in the same class. And it posed some interesting challenges in terms of presentations because of the blind students' needs and the deaf students' needs being so very different. And of course, we managed them and we made the transitions and accommodations that we needed to make in order to make sure that everybody was taken care of in that setting. So sometimes, yes, sometimes there's an impact and sometimes no. Some of my volunteer work is done at an intensive outpatient for people who are in recovery from addictions. And I had the privilege of working with one of my former students, and he's wheelchair bound. And that did not change anything in the class. That had no impact whatsoever. So I think it kind of depends. But I think what you can depend on is that the person who's in front of the class is going to work to make that class work for you.
Thank you. Those are great answers. I have a question here. It looks like it probably might be directed more towards the student. It says, what are your favorite things to get ready for class to be sure you're on time? So I guess like what do you do with your, how do you handle your time management?
Forcing myself to put an alarm. Time management has always been hard for me ever since in high school, but just alarms. And if like the alarms don't work, like the regular sounds don't work, just put yourself some like, I know that Pandora has like alarm on there so you can set your own time and get there ahead of time, because there's always traffic if you're driving there. And now with the pandemic, just like make sure your Wi-Fi is working. But
Thank you. Vito, do you have anything to add? Like, was there any struggle with time management on your part?
Time management wasn't much of an issue for me. I was very organized when I was much younger. I think my favorite things to do when I got ready before I got to go to school, even work, because I worked as well during the time of me going to school. I think my favorite thing to do would be listen to music, get a cup of coffee from Starbucks, and drive late to class. And that was my usual thing for my first 2 years at Pima. I would try to get them as early in the day as I could. So I had one class that started at 7 in the morning, laying on the dot, and I would make sure I was there. And so time wasn't much of an issue, but listening to music has always helped, and it still helps today in the mornings.
Okay, so this is something that I'm just going to answer quickly myself. I've got a question that says, how much of the high school IEP transfers to Pima College? That actually is going to be discussed a little more in our breakout session number 1, which is from the IEP to ADA. We'll talk about how IEPs apply to that. So, okay. This for faculty, how do you recommend people to go to ADR if you think they're having problems? If there's someone in class you didn't find out any, like through an accommodation letter on them, but you see they seem to really be struggling and they say, I need help, what do you usually do to get them hooked up with ADR?
Typically, it starts with a conversation. In math, a lot of times we'll see the evidence that things aren't going well after the first exam. And there are times where we just notice something occurring in the work that we're concerned with. And if the student is willing to meet with me, sometimes that simple conversation says, they just, for example, I was going really slow because I was flustered or anxious or something in the room was bothering me. And sometimes if they tell me, well, I think I just need more time, or sometimes they'll reveal to me that they had certain accommodations in the high school and they didn't think that would translate over. And that conversation immediately navigates to, let's contact ADR. Here's the email. Sometimes I've walked them down when we were in, in the classroom, and that's when the ball gets rolling. It's pretty fast too, which is nice.
Thank you. For the students, have you ever asked for open notes on your tests? And if so, did you get it?
no, I have not asked for open notes.
Okay.
But I've asked for the test, you can have more time on it. You just go to the testing center and you'll let them know like, hey, I'm an ADR client or student from there. And they give you, ADR gives you 2 times more hours on tests. So let's say it's only 1 hour for the test. So you get like more, so you're not as feel as rushed.
Okay. This is one, let's see, it specifically says math, but either the faculty, actually anyone. What kind of accommodations do you typically get in your math classes?
I'll start if that's okay, Tony.
Sure. Oh yeah, go ahead.
A lot of times we see requests for extra time, so 2 times the normal amount. A lot of times in the in-class, usually a student is given an hour and 15 to 2 hours, depending on the number of credits for the class. And so that can double, and that's done in the testing center usually. In the virtual environment right now, we have proctoring services, and so the doubling time is given there. A lot of time there are requests for use of very specific calculators or a given calculator when the class does not normally allow for it. There are occasions where we see formula cards, specifically like maybe like a notes page or something like that. So those are case by case because it just depends on what the class is. And there's a few occasions where the student will need a note taker because the student might need to focus directly with the teacher, and that's how they learn the best. And so in order for them to still get a copy of good notes, they'll ask to have a note taker available.
Thank you, Tony. Probably geared more for writing for Ken. Vito talked about his writing. Do you ever have people come up to you and say, well, I just can't spell, and are you going to grade me off for bad spelling? How have you worked with that?
Well, writing and math at the college level are obviously really different. And testing is really not an issue in writing classes because most of us are working on the writing process. And so when I have a student write an essay, it goes through multiple steps before it ever gets to the end. So there's a first reading where we have the whole class kind of sharing papers back and forth. There are small group workshops and large group workshops, and then there's revision time. So by the time it gets to the end, a student has had his or her paper read multiple times, and including by me. So everyone has word processing at this point, which underlines words that are misspelled. And so I guess what I'm saying is there's a long enough process involved in most of the writing assignments in most of the writing classes that little things like spelling are not an issue. And there's also technologies to help with things like that.
Great, thank you. This is for the students. What kind of accommodations do you get now in your classes, or did you get in your classes?
For me right now, I have more testing time. I also have e-textbooks. So what that is you get your textbooks, and Renee has that you scan the receipt and you can get it online so it can read back to you. Another thing that I get is being able to take pictures in class so the teacher won't get mad at me because I'm using my phone.
Oh, you mean like take pictures of the board, like if they're writing formulas and stuff?
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Vito, did you remember back what you used to get?
Yeah, so one of them was that I did use Cystic technology, but I think that was at the University of Arizona for what was called Dragon. I don't know if that's still around today. Google Arena, right? It's the big one now. I use note taking because I've had some times where it was a lot more lecturing than usual. Sometimes we'll try to take classes that were once a week just to get as much information as I could that day so I could still work that day. I also would use extra time as well. So I did use extra time a lot. I used it at Pima Community College, and I did use it at the University of Arizona because extra time for tests sometimes is the only way I was able to make sure I did everything I could to do well on that test.
Great, thank you. On that note, since you all mentioned extended test time, a lot of times students coming from high school often ask if they can have extended assignment time. They can have extended deadlines, and that is really not as common. So I just want to clarify, because sometimes when people say I got extended time, I have a lot of students that think it means, oh, I can turn in my homework wherever. And that's, again, one of the differences between high school and college. And we will be addressing that a little more in detail in the breakout session number 1. So, okay, let's see. It looks like maybe faculty, could you explain what is the difference between a virtual class and an online class? Are online classes harder than in-person classes?
Tony, you want me to start this one? And
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
So, all right. So a virtual class is like a regular traditional class. It has a specific meeting time, and you'll show up on Zoom to that class and meet with that class at that specific time. An online class is what's called asynchronous, which means you don't have a specific meeting time. The instructor will post videos, they'll post the assignments, and you will work on the assignments and turn in the assignments and do the reading on your own. You can contact the instructor for support, but it's not like being in a situation like this where you can interact in real time with somebody in a classroom, a virtual classroom. I think that online is really good for a specific kind of student, but it can be very difficult because it's really very dependent on the student being in charge of their own learning and being very comfortable doing things predominantly on their own, even though there is support. So there's a lot of writing involved. There's a lot of reading on your own involved, and there's a lot of learning on your own involved. So I think if you're very comfortable doing that, online can be a fine experience. If you're not, virtual or traditional, where you have the instructor there, it's easy to ask questions and you have their presence, I think is probably easier, at least to begin with.
Thank you. Anything to add, Tony?
I think Ken, yeah, that's pretty much everything I was going to say. The thing with success rates for virtual versus online, and we're just starting to look at that data now because we are seeing what virtual can do. And there is a disparity. I would say that virtual tends to have a slightly higher pass rate. It really depends on the class too, especially for math. But as Ken stated, it really does depend on the kind of learner and student that you are. There's many different kinds of learners, but typically students who are self-starters who are already contacting me day one, those are the students that tend to be successful, the ones who need a little bit more support in the sense that they need to be offered more guidance. Those students tend to be more successful in a virtual or face-to-face environment. So.
I have students who have said, I am not taking a math class until we're meeting back on campus. And I'm glad they recognize that. You know, my wife teaches online classes. She's a German instructor, and all of the teachers can see exactly, if you take online, exactly when you're logging in, exactly how much time you're putting in the class, things like that. So as the instructors say, if you are a self-starter, go for it. If you need a lot more guidance, then probably online classes are not going to be the most helpful to you, you know, and that's okay. That's why we offer all these different formats. Tony, and we had a question saying, when are you going to be back on campus? And if it were up to me, I'd say tomorrow, but that remains to be seen. So I don't know if I'm really qualified to answer that, but you know, we're hopefully soon, maybe by next semester, but we'll see. Okay. I think we're about ready to wrap up. Is there any other, I'm looking here, it looks like a lot of the questions, a lot of these were answered privately. But it looks like a lot of the questions got answered. First of all, these sessions are being recorded. If there's anything that you think of afterward, email ADR help. It's all one word, ADR help at pima.edu. And we will direct that question to whoever would be the best person to answer it. So Syria, Vito, Tony, and Ken, I really, really appreciate you coming on. This was really helpful. And I know people like hearing things straight from the horse's mouth. I think that makes the most impact. I appreciate your time now. So let's see, Ken, do you want to now direct to what's going on next?
Sure. Hello, everyone again. If anyone has joined us late for our sessions, we're wrapping up the morning session. We'll have a brief break, and then Tony Taylor and Matt Stutzman will join us soon with a presentation on better understanding that transition from IDEA over to ADA, high school courses to college courses. So we can jump back into that in just a moment after we've had a quick break, grab a drink, use the restroom, those kinds of things, and we'll see you back here real soon.
Okay, we'll see you at 10:10.
Thanks all.
Thank
Hang
you
in there
all.
with us. If you do need to leave and come back in, remember it's the same Zoom link for the whole day and for all of our sessions. See you soon.